I guess after we saw each other for the 8 months that we did, I figured I'd never see him again. I didn't think I ever would.
You think you know the story. Elvis, the king of rock and roll, and Priscilla, the soft-spoken beauty who stood by his side. But what if I told you that everything we've been told was only part of the truth? Because Mike Stone, yes, that Mike Stone, wasn't just some rebound karate guy Priscilla ran to after her fairy tale marriage ended. According to his own words, he didn't pursue her. She pursued him, relentlessly. And what he revealed in a series of later interviews.
Snack bar. It wasn't really a snack bar. It was just a place where a lot of the people would used to go and have hamburgers and Cokes or whatever. And a gentleman came up to me and asked if I'd like to meet Elvis. And I thought he was kidding and said, sure.
It doesn't just challenge Priscilla's version of events, it burns it to the ground. Let's be honest, for decades the story has been polished, cleaned up for public consumption. Priscilla has been painted as the gentle, quiet soul who stayed loyal even after the marriage faded. But Stone's account it shows someone very, very different. It shows a woman in control, strategic, calculated, and maybe, just maybe, using Elvis Presley as a launch pad from the very beginning. Now, before you think this is just another tabloid smear job, hold on. We're not dealing with vague rumors or anonymous sources here. We're talking about Mike Stone himself, the man who was with Priscilla while she was still married to Elvis, and what he describes isn't an innocent woman seeking comfort after a divorce. No, it's a woman who knew exactly what she was doing and exactly what she wanted. Mike didn't chase her. She called him. She showed up uninvited. She waited on hold at his studio for 30 minutes just to talk to him.
Started calling me and kept the relationship going. And I'd hoped to see him again, but I didn't see him until 1962 when he called and asked my parents if they would allow me to go over there and see him.
She inserted herself into his life, his dojo, his apartment, while her husband, Elvis Presley, sat unaware, at least at first. And this wasn't just a fling. This wasn't a moment of weakness. According to Mike, Priscilla was the initiator, the aggressor. The one who crossed the lines again and again while wearing the mask of a demure wife and mother. But here's the real kicker. If she could do that to Elvis, what else could she have done? That's what we're diving into next. From Cary Grant to financial betrayals to Elvis cutting her out of his will, the puzzle starts to come together, and the picture it forms. It's not pretty, so buckle up, because this story is about to take a turn few people saw coming. Mike Stone wasn't some Hollywood player looking for fame or attention. He was a serious martial artist, respected in the karate world, friends with Chuck Norris and far removed from the chaos of Graceland. But that didn't stop Priscilla Presley from chasing him down. Mike didn't pursue Priscilla. He didn't try to steal the king's wife. According to his own words, it was she who inserted herself into his orbit. She invited herself out to drinks with him. She showed up to karate events, eager to be noticed. And when that didn't work fast enough, she called his studio and waited on hold for 30 minutes just to speak to him. Mike was confused. Why would someone drive an hour out of their way multiple times a week just to train at his dojo? Especially when Chuck Norris himself was a more qualified instructor and lived closer. It didn't make sense, unless you understand who Priscilla really was underneath that calm, doe-eyed image. She was on a mission. This isn't a story about a woman healing after heartbreak. This is about a woman hunting what she wanted, married to Elvis, mother of his child, living in luxury, and yet still relentlessly chasing another man. And here's where the narrative starts to crack. Because if she could do that to Elvis while wearing a wedding ring, then how much of her story was ever real? While the cameras still caught glimpses of the Presley family smiling for the public, behind closed doors, something else was unraveling, something that would leave even Elvis Presley reeling. Mike Stone wasn't a secret fling hidden in the shadows for a week or two. He and Priscilla lived together in an apartment for an entire year while she was still legally married to Elvis, while the tabloids still praised her for being the quiet and dignified ex-wife, while she continued to play the role of devoted mother and carefully protected ex. This wasn't about a woman falling out of love and drifting into someone else's arms. It wasn't spontaneous or accidental. It was coordinated. It was sustained. And it was hidden from the very man who had given her everything. Priscilla didn't tell Elvis the truth. According to Stone and others close to Elvis, she told half-truths and sweet-sounding lies. She said she needed time, said she needed space, all while she was actively building a second life with another man right under Elvis's nose. And Stone, he was stunned by her ability to live a double life. At first, he thought it was casual, a few drinks, a few phone calls. But before he knew it, she was moving in. They weren't sneaking around for a weekend. They were a full-blown couple long before the divorce was even finalized. Elvis eventually found out. Of course he did. His inner circle, the Memphis Mafia, saw the signs. They watched Priscilla slip away, and they watched Elvis go from confused to heartbroken to furious. You don't just break a vow of marriage. You break a man's trust, his confidence, his sense of self. Elvis may have had his own flaws. No one's denying that. But the story Priscilla sold for decades, the story of her being blindsided, of her being the hurt one, that doesn't line up with the reality of this year-long lie. Let's not forget. This was a man who once said he would love her forever, who believed, even after everything, that maybe one day they'd find their way back. He thought she needed healing. She was already gone. This wasn't a private collapse of a marriage. It was a slow-motion ambush, one Priscilla had orchestrated while still holding Elvis's hand in public. And if that's how she treated him during the final years of their marriage, then how deep did the deception run from the very beginning? Next, we go back in time to another man, another story that paints Priscilla not as a victim of fame, but as a master of the game. Mike Stone wasn't the first man Priscilla pursued with laser-focused intensity, and he wouldn't be the last. Long before the lavish wedding, before the Graceland photo shoots and magazine covers, there was Cary Grant, the man caught in the margins of the Priscilla-Elvis origin story. Most people forget his name. Priscilla made sure of that, but what he revealed, and what a polygraph test confirmed, cracks the myth of innocent young Priscilla wide open. According to the book, Child Bride by Suzanne Finstad, Priscilla didn't just happen to be in the right place at the right time in Germany. She didn't get swept off her feet by a mysterious superstar. No, she was the one doing the hunting. Cary Grant claimed she approached him, knowing he had connections to Elvis. She asked about the king, nudged her way into his social circle, and it didn't stop there. Cary says Priscilla offered herself emotionally, physically, in exchange for access, for information, for leverage. And this wasn't tabloid gossip. Grant passed a lie detector test. His recollections weren't wild fantasies. They were backed up by photos, records, timelines, all pointing to a very different version of how Priscilla entered Elvis's life. And the photos he took, they weren't innocent snapshots of a teenage girl. They were provocative, carefully posed, designed to catch the attention of a man like Elvis, a man looking for something specific, quiet, shy, obedient, exactly what Cary says Priscilla trained herself to become. Sound familiar? Because that's exactly how she presented herself to Mike Stone. Innocent, soft-spoken, curious, but behind the eyes, a plan, a pattern, a long game. Priscilla's defenders say she was young, impressionable, manipulated by older men, but what if the truth is darker? What if she knew exactly how to charm powerful men and bend them to her advantage? In both stories, with Cary and with Mike, she's the one initiating, she's the one chasing, and when she got what she wanted, she moved on. This isn't about teenage love anymore. This is about strategy, about using romance like currency and wielding desire like a weapon. So ask yourself, was the Elvis-Priscilla love story ever real, or was it engineered from the very beginning? And if Elvis was the prize, how much of Priscilla's innocence was just a mask? It's one thing to speculate, it's another to hear it straight from the man who lived it. In interviews given long after the dust settled, Mike Stone didn't hold back. He wasn't angry. He wasn't vengeful. In fact, his tone was calm, almost clinical. But what he described peeled back the last remaining layer of the Priscilla Presley fairy tale. Mike said Priscilla wasn't confused or searching when she came into his life. She was deliberate. She knew what she wanted, and she made sure he knew it too. She didn't just show up at his studio out of curiosity. She called persistently, waited through long sessions, showed up at events she wasn't invited to. Mike even told her once, "There are better karate instructors closer to you. Why me?" But Priscilla had already decided she wanted Mike. And she got him, but what really made him pause What really unsettled him was her behavior once they were together. She wasn't shy. She wasn't unsure. She was in control. Emotionally, physically, even psychologically. She made herself indispensable. She knew how to act supportive, vulnerable, seductive, whatever the moment called for. She was, in his words, relentless, charming, and completely committed to getting what she wanted. And what did she want? Leverage, attention, power, freedom. A new identity separate from Elvis, built on her own terms, but still riding the momentum of his fame. And the most chilling part, she asked Mike to introduce her to his wife while they were living together while his wife was pregnant. She wanted to play both sides, maintain her image. Keep things neat, tidy, calculated. Mike wasn't blind. He admitted that he was attracted to her, that he enjoyed the attention. But he also saw the strings and the person pulling them. And it wasn't the image the world had been sold. For years, fans believed in the myth of the broken-hearted wife. But according to the man who shared her most intimate moments, that myth was carefully constructed and intentionally misleading. The question is, why would he lie when he already had everything to lose and nothing to gain? By the time the marriage was officially over, Elvis wasn't just emotionally shattered, he was financially bleeding. Most people know that Elvis sold off the rights to his song catalog in the 70s. What they don't always realize is why. It wasn't just bad management, it wasn't just Colonel Parker. It was divorce and everything that came with it. Priscilla didn't just walk away from the marriage. She walked away with a massive financial settlement orchestrated by high-powered California attorneys who knew exactly how to squeeze a public figure under pressure. This wasn't about survival. This wasn't about justice. This was about leverage. And Priscilla played the game like a professional. Elvis had to sell his publishing rights, rights that would be worth hundreds of millions of dollars today, just to meet the demands and obligations created by the divorce. That one decision, forced by mounting legal and financial pressure, crippled his long-term income. Priscilla moved on, rebranding herself, securing financial comfort, and grooming her public image. Elvis was left paying the price, quite literally, for trusting her. And here's the deeper cut. She didn't just take money. She took part of his identity, the music, the rights, the legacy. The legacy. Now, to be fair, Elvis wasn't perfect with money. Everyone knows that. But this wasn't just recklessness. This was exhaustion. Emotional, mental, financial, brought on by a legal strategy that drained him of his most valuable asset, his art. And while Elvis struggled to regain control over his finances and his image, Priscilla's profile rose. She became a spokesperson, icon of a graceful ex-wife elegance. She spun her narrative well: heartbreak, respect, ongoing friendship. Meanwhile, she was living in the luxury afforded by the very man whose life she helped break apart. If she had truly loved him, if this was about peace or closure, would she have allowed it to go that far? Would she have taken it all? Because when the dust settled, Elvis had lost his voice, and Priscilla had secured her future. And that's what makes this so hard to swallow. Yethaloo. It wasn't just betrayal of love, it was betrayal of trust, creativity, and legacy. She got the freedom, she got the respect, she got the clean public image. Elvis got the heartbreak, the financial ruin, and eventually the grave. So ask yourself, who really won, and what did it cost? For all the stories Priscilla told about eternal love, Elvis's final decision said everything. When he died in 1977, the world mourned. But behind the scenes, his will was already speaking for him, and what it said was loud and clear. Priscilla Presley was completely cut out. No inheritance. No property, no legal control over his estate. Nothing. She was not named as a beneficiary. She wasn't trusted with the future of Graceland. She wasn't even granted a ceremonial role. For a man as generous, some say overly generous, as Elvis, that kind of omission was more than a legal detail. It was a message. Elvis may have still had warm words for her in public for Lisa Marie's sake, but privately, he'd seen enough. After the affairs, the financial fallout, the betrayal, he made a conscious decision. Priscilla would not have the final say over his legacy. But here's where the story takes a strange, almost cinematic turn. After Vernon Presley, Elvis's father and executor, fell ill and near death, Priscilla made her move. Sources close to the family say she reinserted herself into the picture during Vernon's final days. Whether out of concern or calculation, we may never know, but the result was undeniable. She emerged as a co-executor of the Elvis estate. Think about that. The very woman Elvis had legally removed, now sitting in a position of power over his name, his music, his mansion, all through legal maneuvering and timing. And then came the narrative rewrite. Priscilla, the grieving ex-wife. Priscilla, the savior of Graceland. Priscilla, the protector of the king's legacy, all while quietly assuming a role he never intended for her to have. It's no longer just about marriage and divorce. It's about legacy theft, about rewriting history in real time. Elvis tried to close the door, and she found a window. This was the final break, the final act of a relationship that had turned from love to loss, to something much colder, strategy. And the saddest part, Elvis never lived to see it unfold. But we did. And now, knowing everything that led up to it, do you think he'd be surprised? So now we're left with the question that haunted Elvis in his final years and haunts his fans to this day. Did Priscilla ever truly love him? Or was Elvis Presley just a means to an end? We've traced the story from the beginning, not the public version, but the hidden one. From Curry Grant's shocking testimony, backed by a polygraph and photographic evidence, to Mike Stone's confessions of pursuit, manipulation, and a double life lived in broad daylight. From the secret apartment affair to the financial gutting of Elvis's career. From her removal from the will to her last-minute return to power. Each step tells a consistent story. This wasn't a woman swept up in a whirlwind romance. This was a woman who knew how to play the game and win. Was it love, or was it calculation? Because let's be honest, if you strip away the soft lighting and the Hollywood headlines, what remains is a chilling pattern. A young girl who learned how to get what she wanted. A woman who built her empire on someone else's downfall. And a legacy that's been shaped by those who may have had the most to gain. Priscilla Presley has spent decades positioning herself as the gatekeeper to Elvis's image, the elegant widow of the king. But when you examine the details, the timelines, the testimonies, the receipts, that image begins to crack. She didn't lose Elvis. She left him. She didn't honor his name. She leveraged it. She wasn't written into his legacy. She wrote herself in. And now, after everything, after the stories, the interviews, the Graceland tours, one question still lingers. Did Elvis fall in love with the real Priscilla, or with the role she played? That's not a question this video can answer. That's one you have to wrestle with. But one thing is certain, the version of history we were sold isn't the whole story. And maybe it never was. Backhand index pointing down, let us know in the comments. Was Priscilla Presley a victim of fame or a master of manipulation? Oh, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more untold stories, uncomfortable truths, and the side of Elvis history that rarely gets talked about.